Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Paolo, your geography teacher. As always, it's an honor to have you here with me on Geo Illustrata. And in today's video, we're talking about the biomes of the world. Yeah, those ones you saw at school and didn't really understand. Tundra, taiga, prairie, temperate forest, among others. We're going to talk about all of them, all right? Stay with me until the end to fully understand, okay? Well, let's start with an introduction, because this introduction is essential to understanding the rest of the content. First point. The planet has different types of vegetation, right? You already know that, with some areas having denser vegetation, others having shorter vegetation. Anyway, the types are very diverse, and these large formations are called biomes. In short, a biome is a group of ecosystems with similar fauna, climate, soil, and vegetation, okay? That's the simplified explanation. But just reminding you that in this video, I'm going to specifically address the issue of vegetation, all right? But then you might ask yourself, what makes the planet have such a diversity of vegetation? And here there are a few factors, but the main one is latitude. What is latitude? It's those horizontal lines that go around planet Earth, right? They're what define the thermal zones of the planet. For example, that central band there is the tropical zone. It's the hot and humid zone of planet Earth. So the tendency is for large forests to grow there, right? The tropical forests, like the Amazon rainforest, for example. Further up, we have the temperate climate with well-defined seasons. Cold and dry winters and hot and humid summers. So the vegetation there also tends to adapt to these climate characteristics, right? And further up in the high latitude zones, we have the polar zones. In other words, extreme cold for most of the year. So it's easy to imagine that the vegetation there also adapts to these conditions. So it's essential that you can make this connection between vegetation and climate. Okay, that said, let's start talking about the biomes. Starting here with the tundra. Well, this vegetation is characteristic of high latitude zones. Specifically there near the North Pole, right? We have northern Canada, northern Europe, and Asia anyway. So there, as I said a little while ago, the temperatures are low practically all year round. And in the few moments when the temperature rises a little and the ice melts, it makes it possible for vegetation to grow. But we're talking here about vegetation like mosses, lichens, shrubs, right? Nothing large. The next type of vegetation is the taiga, also known as the coniferous forest. That's because the trees here take on that cone shape, you know? And we'll talk about why in a moment. This type of vegetation is characteristic of the northern hemisphere, right? In the high latitude zones, more or less to the south of the tundra. So it's basically located between the temperate and polar climates. And in this latitudinal range, even though it's cold for a good part of the year, with extreme cold, there are also more warm periods, right? That's why this type of vegetation here is bigger. It grows more than the tundra. And the cone shape I mentioned is exactly to avoid the accumulation of snow. Besides that, this type of vegetation here also has needle-shaped leaves. What does that mean? They are needle-shaped leaves, right? Very thin. And they also have a waxy coating to prevent the accumulation of snow. All good so far, right? So now let's move on to the temperate forest. And where are they found? In the temperate climate, right? As you might guess from the name. And here, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, what is the main characteristic of the temperate climate? Well-defined seasons, right? Cold winters and hot summers. Because of that, this vegetation will adapt to these climate characteristics. What do I mean by that? The characteristic plants here in the temperate forest are called deciduous or caducifolious. But what does that mean? It means that they lose almost all, if not all, of their foliage, their leaves, right around winter. This is a mechanism of adaptation to the cold climate. And then when winter is ending, it starts to recover those leaves, right? Producing the leaves again. So these are the caducifolious or deciduous plants, okay? You might see either of these two names. And here it's also important to point out that these regions are also heavily modified by humans, especially in Europe. So, all right, now finally, let's talk about them. The tropical forests. But before that, just a quick message. Are you a student and want to optimize your geography studies? Or a teacher who needs to save time preparing lessons? Then check out our ready-made mind map and slide kits from GeoIllustrata. I took all the videos from the channel and turned them into slides and mind maps. Educational materials that are straight to the point, ready to use. And with the GeoIllustrata quality you already know, the links are here in the video description. To get to know it better, all right? Well, tropical forests are mainly found in the tropical region, right? Seriously, Professor? If you hadn't said it, I wouldn't have guessed, huh? Ah, I know. But anyway, and they are mainly located in the equatorial zone, that is, near the equator. As two examples, we have the Amazon rainforest here in Brazil, which is the largest in the world, and the Congo rainforest over there in Africa. Both are located there, in the same latitudinal zone. And why is that, guys? Because I mentioned it at the beginning, right? The low latitude zones, that is, close to 0 degrees, the equator. These are very hot and humid areas. Practically the whole year, hot and humid. So it favors the growth of this type of tall vegetation. So it's very dense vegetation with great biodiversity. They also have very large leaves, right? Called broadleaves. This is mainly to make it easier to absorb sunlight. And moving on, we have the savannas, a biome that's well represented in movies like The Lion King and Madagascar 2. And the savanna region also has very specific climate characteristics, like hot and rainy summers. Winters are drier and colder. Because of that, the vegetation also adapts, right? For example, we have deep roots to draw water from deep in the soil during the driest times of the year, and also thick bark, which is a way to resist the intense heat. The vegetation in this biome is basically grasses, shrubs, and small to medium-sized trees. And another characteristic of these trees as well, they're really twisted, right? That very peculiar shape. And here, as great examples, we have the African savanna, and also the Brazilian savanna, which is the Cerrado. That's right, the Cerrado is also a type of savanna. Stay strong, okay? We're already reaching the end of the video. There are only 2 biomes left, grasslands and deserts, okay? Well, grasslands are present on several continents, like South America, North America, and Asia. And they are characteristic of the temperate climate. However, here its vegetation is predominantly low-growing, right? Made up of open fields. As a great example, we have the Brazilian pampas, right? Here in Brazil. It's a biome characteristic of Rio Grande do Sul. And now finally the last one. Deserts. And congratulations to you who made it to the end of the video. Warrior, let's go. And here the main deserts of the world are in the 30-degree latitude zone, folks. If you understood why that is, I won't explain it in this video because it's a bit complex. But watch this video here about general atmospheric circulation, where I explain it properly. But if you're an elementary or middle school student, don't watch it, okay? Because it might be a bit too complex for you. I'm not underestimating you, of course. Well, as a great example, we have the Sahara Desert, right? Which is also in Africa, the largest hot desert in the world. And the vegetation of the desert is called xerophyllous. In other words, plants adapted to extreme drought. As an example, we have the cactus, the famous cactus. Deserts also have a large temperature range. In other words, a big difference between the daily highs and lows, right? During the day, it's very hot. At night, very cold. That's because of the lack of humidity. So, the inability to retain heat. I'm leaving 2 videos on your screen. One of them is about general atmospheric circulation, which I mentioned earlier. And it really complements the content of this video here, okay? Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of the video. I truly hope I was able to help you. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. Take care. Bye-bye. See you next time.